Russia murders children. So much for a great Russian culture. NATO Summit in Washington, expectations and reality. Hello, it's abnormally hot these days in Kiev, around 50 Celsius, but here we are, no matter what. UATV English with me, Henry Keane, working as usual for you to bring hard truth to easy terms for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. This week, Ukraine and the entire world were shocked by a Russian brutal attack on Ukraine's largest children's hospital, Okhmatdyt. Well, to be honest with you, I never know what actually to say when something really bad happens in the world. Like, the world is a bad place? Well, it is a strange place, rather. But if it is a bad place, it is solely because of us. Because it's our world. And that means that we are bad people. That is a hard truth in easy terms, like it or not. We never care enough to prevent bad things from happening. That is why our world is too slow, too timid, too infantile, too philistine and too stupid. That is why, to start acting good, our world badly needs a very, very bad thing to happen in it.
Можна дійти хоча б до воріт в центр порушено.
As a result of this act of terror, all buildings of the hospital were damaged. The building of the toxicology department was completely destroyed. This is a shocking story, but it is not for me to go into detail about it because I wasn't there. What I can do for you, though, is to ask those who were present there the very moment tragedy actually happened. Watch exclusively at UATV English. Ukrainian doctors who treat morbidly ill children on Okhmatdyt Hospital are sending their personal message to their Russian counterparts. Hello, Anastasia.
Hello.
First of all, Atmos, thank you so very much for your time and for what you do here. I know that your time is more than just precious these days, and especially this week. Can you tell us a little bit more who you are here? I believe you're a doctor here at Okhmatdyt, right?
Yes, yeah. I am a doctor radiologist, and also I am a chief of radiology diagnostic department of our huge radiology center of Okhmatdyt.
Yeah, we heard about that, and we also heard what happened here, but I just must ask this question for 100 times probably. What happened here and when?
So on the 8th of July, there was a missile attack, a huge missile attack. There was a lot of different missiles in the air, and one of them unfortunately hit our hospital. and you can see on the background what that they had destroyed partially the building that was dedicated to treat children with kidney failure disease, toxicology department.
And also the oncology. I mean, is that the departments for the children who were fighting cancer? Is that right? Or am I wrong?
Sometimes kids that have cancer, they also were treated sometimes in this part of because it's very multidisciplinary disease, so sometimes children move from one department to another, so it's possible.
Help me to understand, it's a huge building I see here. It's a huge department. A lot of people working here, and of course a lot of patients. So how do you treat them now? You allocated them, relocated them to some other places?
Yes, I'm, as I said, I'm mostly a diagnostic radiologist doctor. So a lot of our patients, as I know, were relocated to other hospitals. They're treated in different places now with different doctors, but still some of our doctors, as these patients are very complicated, their disease are hard to treat sometimes. So some of them are accompanied by doctors from Okhmatdyt on the places into hospitals in which they were relocated and evacuated.
Great, great. Thank you so very much. And just one last question, if you will. What do you do with the hate? Can you forgive after what happened? I know there's a work, and you being a doctor, it's more than just a profession. It's probably a vocation. It's the calling. But still, in the middle of a day, you probably find yourself that you would have to treat your own problem, your own hate. Because when I see this, I hate everything Russian. I'm sorry, but I do.
So I think. When I see, yes, I also from the start from the full-scale invasion, I like trying to
avoid it.
To avoid everything Russian. I don't watch any more translation in Russia, like films with the Russian translation. I speak only Ukrainian, as I did it before actually, but sometimes I was changing to some people, to some patients when they speak Russian to me. About this attack, I think that it's, as for me, I think that this kind of attack, when it's like children with cancer and with chronic diseases, I think it's the position of the weak person. Because only a weak person can mock somebody weaker than himself. So I think it's like not the position of the strong person.
This is obviously what it is. Yes. I believe it is even something more, but this is a matter of a bigger discussion, and I don't think you have time for this. But if I may, if you don't want, you just don't do it. If you have any friends, let's imagine that you have friends and colleagues in Russia, a lot of doctors. What would you say to them? You can also use Ukrainian language if you want to. You can do it, and I will later translate it.
I would say that their spirit is not strong enough if they cannot unite. They are doctors, they should be for people, they should be for children, and they don't have the strength of mind to resist where they live. And if they like this life, then this is the life they deserve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so very much, Bogdan, for the time that you are giving us. I know that the patients are waiting. Can you please get us acquainted with who you are, how you work here in this Okhmatdyt hospital? What do you do?
So I'm Bogdan Dolhanek. I'm an anesthesiologist.
Right.
So I work here for 6 years. First I started working here as a nurse during my study at medical university. Right. Then I had an internship here for 2 years, and now I work as a doctor for 3 years here.
So it was your turn to work here when all this happened?
Yes, I have 24-hour shift on Mondays usually. So I was on a duty in intensive care unit for a post-operative patient, and we had 3 post-operative patients on my shift that I was treating.
Again, if you don't mind asking, and I've been asking your colleagues just as well. I know this is a strange question, but I need to ask it. So what happened? Can you tell us?
First of all, the air alarm started, and we were reading different information channels that there is a combined missile attack on Kyiv. So we started to try to evacuate our patients for more safe places, out of windows, rooms without windows with double walls, but my critically ill patients, 2 of them, one after mechanical ventilation, another having coma, having mechanical ventilation, having renal replacement therapy, so dialysis, big machine.
Right.
Yes, so it was really difficult to evacuate. So we were trying to stop the procedures and trying to transport them in safer places, but it's still difficult because these places need oxygen and others. So
well, come on, it's crazy difficult. It's impossible to me because I believe there's a lot of patients here in this is a big building. Yeah,
but our patients couldn't walk.
Couldn't walk, exactly. So what do you do? What are they okay now? Well, if I can say okay, but are they safe? Are they in safe places here?
After the rocket explosions started, we had evacuation. So I was transporting one of them, more critical patient, to other medical facility in Kyiv, where the dialysis can be provided also.
So this is how it is working. You just take your patients and you spread them all over the hospitals in Kyiv so they can have the treatment according later on. Right?
Yeah. We have very special treatment facilities here, special machines, and not all the hospitals have such machines. So we need to ask all the hospitals that can provide such treatment. It's pretty hard to perform.
Well, I have a question. Do you think? Well, maybe I'm sure you thought about that. Do you think that Russians did that on purpose? Do you think that they've sent all the missiles they've sent here to actually hurt and kill children and doctors here in Kyiv? Do you think so?
Actually, I'm not confident, but I know that this pediatric hospital is with very vulnerable people here, and it could be done on purpose because just to make more fear, more scared people.
You're not looking feared to me.
I have much work even now, so.
Okay, well.
Ukrainians are not so scared
exactly.
as Russians need us to be.
Exactly. This is what I was trying you to push to exactly to this answer, because for 2.5 years, you must be really understand anything else, something new about Ukraine. That this is not going to help the Kremlin plans. But even if this is done on purpose or not, I've asked Anastasia she was just a minute before you here in this place, so I've asked her to send a message to Russians and to Russian colleagues and to all Russia. Do you want to do that? You can do that in Ukrainian if you want, so we can translate the land, or you can just say.
I don't speak Russian well, I will speak Ukrainian. I don't know if any other Russians are going to listen to us. They have many sources that they listen to, but these people claim to be very Orthodox Christians and so on, but they do things that are not Christian at all. We know and we are sure that God exists, He sees it, and we will continue to do our work. We will take care of our children, treat our patients, and God will help us win, and everyone who is involved in this will get what they deserve.
Slava Ukraini. Дуже добре. And then the world tends to forget about things that happen quite fast. Oh, we love to forget. We are so good at it to forget about things happen not to us. We never care for a reason why. Some even forge their own version of reality until it matches their own beliefs. Even today, even on the backdrop of the tragedy, some say Ukraine did that, murdered our own children. Please do not let the outrage fool you now. It is actually very important to listen carefully to what these people say, because what they say actually tells us a whole lot about who's talking. They actually consider it's possible. By accusing Ukraine, they actually admit they could do it, if necessary. I mean to kill their own terminally cancer-ill children so only to sabotage the image of their enemy. As if the image of a terrorist state ruled by an ICC-indicted paranoid schizophrenic can be sabotaged anymore. But you see, Russia always was just like that. Always at war, always barbaric, always trying to murder as much civilians as possible so those left alive fall on their knees and start begging and pushing their own authorities towards peace, even so shameful and unjust for the nation. Russia wants exactly that, based on their unjust children-murdering terms, peace. So the rest of the world can sigh in relief and turn away and finally forget. And since we are so keen to forget the hard truth about ourselves, I see my journalistic calling in making the world remember it as long as possible. This is why I live in Ukraine. You see, this is why I work in Ukraine. We will remember it forever, and you, dear world, please remember it for at least a bit longer, so Ukraine can use this horrific bit of a time in its favor to stop Russian dictator's Putin's bloody dream from becoming a reality, just like it did, unfortunately, happen these days in Okhmatdyt. First of all, my expectations were not met. They were exceeded. Surprisingly. But that's my thing. As a journalist, I tend to keep my expectations low, zero level if possible. So, however, this time I was actually expecting some talking about Ukraine in the form of, yes, but I never expected anything as irreversible as we got in the end.
Last year, the G7 nations signed on a declaration to protect Ukraine long term. Not just for the duration of this war, but beyond after they win. 25 additional countries quickly joined them and pledged to negotiate and sign a bilateral security agreement with Ukraine. Now, 1 year later, more than 20 countries plus the European Union have completed and signed these agreements. This compact brings all those countries together in a unified, coordinated, and comprehensive architecture to support Ukraine, not just for now, but for years in the future. In the short term, we'll continue to supply Ukraine with the weapons, munitions, and training they need to repel Russian forces. In the medium term, we'll help build a future force that has the strength and the capabilities both to defend Ukraine and deter further aggression. In the long term, after this war is over, if Putin ever tries it again, all the countries that endorsed the compact have pledged to have Ukraine's back.
But what does it mean, really? I mean, even in irreversible way can be a long way to go. So why is that word irreversible? Is that important for Ukraine, after all? First, it is a political recognition of the fact that Ukraine will become a part of NATO. This is an inevitable political reality. This is what will happen. The very fact of such recognition is vital for us in Ukraine, as from the point of view of Western diplomacy confirms the bare fact Russia won't be let to win. In the West, some of our partners were and some are still convinced that one of the reasons for Russia's war against Ukraine was that Ukraine wanted to join NATO. So now fixing Ukraine's irreversible path to full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership, is a huge thing for Ukraine. Meaning NATO powers have recorded the moment will come when Ukraine becomes a part of the family. It is a record that neither Russia with its imperial desires nor China with its desires for so-called balance and peace in the world cannot oppose. Meaning there will be a victory for the West in general and ultimately for Ukraine. Also comes more help and better coordination in funding in the face of Russian aggression. The Allies intended to provide a minimum core funding of 40 billion euros over the next year. Yes, it is not a breakthrough on our way to NATO, many political scientists say. Well, sure thing. Not a breakthrough. For you, maybe, dear political scientists out there in your political science offices. But for us in Ukraine, oh, it is a different story. Every little step towards safety from Russia and towards just and long-lasting peace is a breakthrough for us. So that's a matter of point of view, I believe. I decided to talk about the NATO Summit in Washington to someone who lives in Europe and actually visits Ukraine frequently to have a balanced point of view, if you like, former British Army Colonel Glenn Grant, who is now in Ukraine.
It is indeed. Yeah, I'm here.
Why? If, may I ask?
Good question. Good question. I've been invited by the university to come and talk to people. So that's one good reason. And then the second reason, I think, is you could just call it showing solidarity with people in Sumy who are not having the best of time of it at the moment. So I think it's important that, you know, people like myself don't just come and sit in Kiev, but actually get out to places a bit closer to the front line and meet people.
People like me too. I'm leaving for a trip very soon. I will tell you more about it when I'm back. But tell me,
okay,
Summit NATO in Washington, what were your expectations, Mr. Grant?
Actually, I think I expected a bit more discord than actually there was. I think that the overall the strength of feeling was still positive in terms of you know, pro-Ukraine, and I suppose we have to be thankful for that. And you know, the agreements and all the things that came out of it that were signed at the end, they're pretty positive. They could have been a lot worse, but they're not. They are saying, you know, NATO, but not yet, which we knew anyway. But at least that you know, there are some positive actions in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I share that feeling. I expected worse, but let me put that. What is, in very concrete military terms, Ukraine could have hoped to gain if accepted, say, tomorrow? What weapons?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't think that there would have been anything particularly much different, even if we'd been accepted for NATO. I mean, one of the things that is being talked about a lot at the moment is whether other countries should provide training inside of Ukraine, right, for Ukrainian troops. But this is proving challenging, not just for other countries, but for the Ukrainian general staff as well, who actually are not really going towards people in being open to ideas like this in a positive manner. I mean, they've had lots of people have sort of recommended and made suggestions of how things could be helped, and unfortunately, the general staff have really not bitten on these in the way that they should have done, and so that there's a worry that you know, countries will want to provide training in country, but it won't be vastly more useful than actually doing it in their own country where they've got their own resources, because there's a danger that the Ukrainian side will not produce the required resources needed to make foreign training effective.
Okay, but it is also a sort of a bargain. So what is in turn Ukraine can bring on the table, whether in NATO tomorrow or in half a year or in a year? What is the Ukrainian part of the deal?
Yeah, I mean, the future, NATO's got, Ukraine has got one thing, which is training areas. And they've got some big training areas, and they're things which in heavily built up Europe are missing. Heavily built up UK, for example, is completely missing a training area where you can rampage around with a brigade, whereas Ukraine has actually got space. So that, I think, is one important thing. I mean, trained troops is another, but we've still got this fundamental problem for Ukraine of actually not really identifying how to restructure the brigades and battalions so that they are compatible with NATO forces. That is something that is being written about and talked about frequently, but just seems to be ignored as being either too difficult or conceptually not acceptable to the senior military.
So I'm trying to figure out for myself a main obstacle on the way to NATO, wherever and whenever it comes. And so this is the major obstacle, you say, to make it compatible?
No, I think the first one, there are 2 or 3 major obstacles, one of which is just cultural, is that the senior general staff do not invite NATO. That's it. They don't. They actually push people away. I mean, you get plenty of people coming and to Ukraine, plenty of people with a lot of skills and abilities, whether that's Air Force, whether it's General Ben Hodges, whether it's other people, and basically the most they ever get is a across the table discussion. They're not actually. Nobody's ever really allowed into the Ukrainian system. Well, that isn't how it works in NATO. You go into NATO, then we all have each other's officers in each other's headquarters.
Right,
and in some cases, right in the center in things like intelligence. Now, you haven't got to do this to that level, but at least something that isn't just, please come into this conference room, speak to us for 10 minutes and then go away. This friendship, which is a fundamental part of NATO, this ability to sit down with other people and discuss things, is, I'm afraid, totally missing. And at time of war, this is needed more than ever. Not less, but more.
I can't agree more with you. It's absolutely right. But could that be the absence of this friendship, I would say? Is that Guardian recently published, that open letter about how Ukraine should not be a part of NATO, and when and under what circumstances. Have you heard of this letter anyway? Open letter.
Yeah. No, I mean, I read the Guardian article. I mean, it's a typical pro-Russian article that the Guardian seems to be very good at putting out at the moment. I mean, they have done so for the last few years. They've always been very left-wing, but they seem to be lacking completely in editorial checking of what their journalists are actually producing. So this is, as I say, this is another pro-Russian article, and I would say that there are a lot of articles like this, and a lot of bloggers going out saying similar things at the moment. And this is because Russia is under pressure in lots of ways, and it doesn't want NATO to get closer to Ukraine. So it's doing everything it can to push NATO away. But this then, therefore, that actually brings us back to, this is more and more and more a reason why Ukraine needs to be pulling NATO in to get that friendship and to get that relationship and to get the understanding of what really are NATO standards, not what someone thinks is some technical thing that's been translated, but actually what are the standards that make NATO work as a collective organization. And Ukraine military are still a long, long way away from understanding this fundamental difference between themselves and how NATO actually operates as an organization.
Thank you so very much for this criticism. If Ukraine is accepted in NATO, like again tomorrow, do you think this very fact will escalate the war? What do you think Putin will do if, say, in the summit in Washington, the alliance says yes in 3 or 4 months?
Well, let me jump back to, I think, May 22, when Britain and America both were producing tanks for Ukraine.
Right.
And those tanks, you will remember, included depleted uranium rounds.
Right.
If you go back and read the articles there, Medvedev was saying, this is the final straw. This is a line which has been crossed, and so forth. There will be ramifications, etc., etc. Now, come on, that's a year plus ago, and there was no differences. So I think that if NATO took Ukraine in now, there would be no difference on the Russian side, because they simply have no capacity at the moment to do anything except go nuclear, which is effectively the destruction of themselves. And I can't see any of those senior people in Russia who've got families in the West, sitting in Italy and nice houses in Cyprus and everywhere else, being too happy starting a nuclear war and destroying their own families.
So, should you think Ukraine, once in NATO, have a nuclear arsenal of its own or not? Or this is already a closed question?
That's a good question. I mean, arguably, the failure of the Budapest Treaty has actually shown every country in the world that if you haven't got nuclear, you're at risk of the idiots in Russia and China. But of course, if Ukraine actually becomes a member of NATO, then it does fall under the NATO nuclear umbrella, which is US, UK, and France. So I think at that stage there will be no need for it to expend absolutely vast amount of money on nuclear weapons when effectively it gets its own by being a member of NATO. And I mean, you don't see Germany rushing around or Poland rushing around to get nuclear weapons. They just want weapons on their soil.
Again, Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Grant is actually in Sumy now, and he says that's the joy of Sumy because there was a power outage that interrupted us so rudely. Mr. Grant, when you will be back to Riga or when the coverage signal will be better, we will definitely continue this conversation. Thank you so very much for actually helping us in Ukraine, in Sumy. If I say enjoy Sumy, would that be too rude?
No, I shall do my best.
Right.
Okay, thank you. And I'll let you know when I'm around.
Stay safe.
Week, I hope.
Thank you so very much. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Okay.
Well, that was it for tonight's episode and for the week. For news from Ukraine, stay with Ukraine. UATV English is going to break hard truth in easy terms for you as usual. Please subscribe, like, comment. Your voice really matters as it helps Ukrainian voice to be heard globally. Stay safe. Tune for more news, updates and interviews already next week with us in UATV English. Goodbye.